you like to sit?
No, thank you.
Okay. I'll plop down just for size sake.
Do it.
Okay, so state your name and company for the record, please.
My name is Elyse Sundita, founder of With Love by Eco LLC.
Bum, bum, bum. Elevator pitch for With Love by Eco?
It is a mindful knitting company that is interweaving social justice with mindfulness through the art of knitting.
Interweaving. Well done. And then how can people find With Love by Eco or you?
Instagram at With Love by Eco, and you'll find all my information that way. Thanks.
Beautiful. All right. So what? Well, we've been the With Love by Eco thing.
Mm-hmm.
Though I love the word choice on that. Let's talk about some of your other projects, though. Yes. What else are your driving passions other than, of course, conscious knitting and lovely
mindfulness? I am also the community outreach director at Culture Energized, a company that was spearheaded by Mo Abdallah. She's amazing. And I help her do diversity and inclusion training through organizations, companies, nonprofits, all spectrums. We work with youth all the way to whatever you need us to do.
What is your specialty? Or what is Culture Energized?
Oh.
What is that specialty?
It's basically bringing in energy and weaving that into the DNA of companies, because if you can empower the people, your profits and your revenues go up, and it all starts with the people.
So what's a day in the life?
We're now getting leads through referrals, which is awesome. And how our diversity and inclusion trainings are different from other people is Mo is the Energizer bunny. She's fabulous, and because of her working with kids, she is able to bring in an energy unlike most diversity and inclusion trainings offer. And we have an interactive piece, which is huge because diversity and inclusion are really hard topics. Mm-hmm. They're topics that people are, one, uncomfortable with, two, they've never maybe even thought of unconscious bias, and we are interweaving this beautiful interactive parts of it where people are moving, they're playing games, and they're laughing with each other, because in these dark times we need laughter to balance it all out.
All of the things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what's your piece in that?
I'm kind of the community outreach director. I'm helping her with the newsletters. I help her find events that we can do some icebreakers on. I basically help her keep her on track when she's kind of all over the place. I'm definitely more of the note taker when it comes to things, and just making sure that we, cross our T's, dot our I's, and I'm slowly working my way with her, so that way, as I'm continuing my work with her, I can gain more responsibility, so she doesn't have to do so much of it.
Right on. Okay, so one of the tricky things that I've noticed is that you can speak English and say the same words as people, but then you are saying completely different things. Mm-hmm. So how have you come to define, ask first about diversity and then go into inclusion, but what does diversity look like to you?
Diversity to me looks more than just racially diverse. We, as society, we've been taught what diversity looks like, and that means all rainbows of colors come in, and not necessarily, especially when you come in to a state or to a city like Denver, where it's mostly white folks. But not all white folks have the same experiences. Maybe a majority of it may be the same, but we all have our own experiences and our own past that has happened to us. So it's about from the beginning of our training, we do a survey to see how kind of the pulse of what the company looks like, so that way we know where do people know what unconscious bias is? Do people even know what bias is? Do people have bias? That's a thing, and some people will say no, and that's, if people say no, they don't have bias, then we're gonna start all the way in the beginning. And we give them the understanding of what bias is, and then it kind of moves into microaggressions, and then throughout it all we tell people, like, if you have questions, please ask us. That's exactly what we're here for, to have these hard conversations, so that way when we leave, the company isn't just, oh, what do we do now? We give them the tools to continue on the conversation, because diversity and inclusion doesn't happen in one training or in one day. And both Mo and I were both constantly working on each other to make sure that we show up for ourselves.
How are you finding diversity showing up in something as small as a two-man team? Two-person team.
Yes.
There we go, right there.
Right?
Right there.
That was your unconscious bias, being like, oh, look, and boom. Awareness. Awareness is super huge for both of us. And we both recognize that we have such great strengths and weaknesses, and how can we show up for each other when one isn't feeling all that 100% during that day. Or, we really help balance out each other in just being our true selves. And sometimes we can't be constantly on, and that's okay. Sometimes we'll have a low energy day, and it's like, okay, well, let's just get through these emails. We'll pick it up, tomorrow or the next day. Because we're not machines. That's the thing. We're not machines.
Plot twist. So you mentioned, before we get to defining inclusion, you mentioned that you measure kind of the health of the organization as far as diversity goes. What kind of things do you look at? So, like, if someone was wanting to look at their organization, whether they're in a leadership position or not, be like, how diverse is this thing? What kind of things would they look at?
For the questionnaire, we're able to kind of customize it to the organization, and we ask, like, the person who is taking this anonymous questionnaire, what role are they in? Are they in leadership? Are they in entry level? And then we can kind of dig deeper as to, if you were to have a different viewpoint from your manager, do you feel as if your voice is still heard, or do you have fear that it gets reprimanded, kind of thing? And then if they say, oh, my voice is heard, I totally feel safe, but a few questions down the line, we ask that same question in a different manner, and then it's like, actually, no, I'm not, I don't feel safe. Then you're saying two different things, and really, what is that? What are they really saying? Like, oh, this is a diverse company, but they're not. Their actions that they take aren't really diverse, or they're not honoring the different opinions of their employees.
So that would be like getting employee feedback and then taking no action on it.
Gotcha. Exactly. And then we're just seeing how safe does the employees feel. Do they understand that even though management has such an upper hand, the employees at the bottom level are just as important. And if they're not happy, the rest of the organization suffers. But if the rest of the organization doesn't understand that and doesn't understand why they're not making numbers, that's a problem. They're not recognizing that there's differences.
So you gave a really good example about having a company that you were talking to that had a very narrow idea of what diversity was.
Mm-hmm.
The whole, we need to be more diverse, so we're going to hire more women.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So Mo and I, we hosted an event last night called Coffee, Culture, and Conversations, and we had these prompts. And the people who attended this small event were so amazing. They definitely they knew about intersectionality, about microaggressions, unconscious bias. They just had their vocabulary they definitely worked on. And we asked this question of, some companies believe, we need to be more diverse. Let's hire more diversity. Let's hire specifically more women. But within that spectrum, there's the intersectionality. A woman of color, a woman who doesn't happen to be, who isn't straight. There's so many things that just happen, and they have their own experiences. And you can't just, I'm going to hire more women, and that solve the problem. That's not solving any problem. In fact, if the company itself isn't safe and hasn't really looked within themselves of being a healthy organization, the more diverse they are, the more problems that will come with the diversity.
Oh, so then as a company, what do they have to do? So in addition to these diversity and inclusion trainings, what other things have to happen to, I don't know, I guess, kind of take a company out of being run by a bunch of old white men into being run by, whatever metric you want to measure diversity by?
I think within that explanation is part of the answer, which is looking at the actual company and seeing who is in the management positions, who is in the leadership positions. And if it's all a bunch of white older men, then, and if most of the demographic is young, diverse, in the sense of just from their backgrounds, from their education levels, that's the majority of their company, then that's not a true reflection of the company. And therefore, an older white man's view is not going to be the same as a young 20-something-year-old who's living in the city, kind of thing. And it's about looking at the bigger picture and understanding, this is a problem. If you're in a room that looks just like you need to get out of that room, because how rich will your life be if you're surrounded by people who look like you and who think like you? Because a big part of it is not just having people who echo your thoughts. Mm-hmm. You need people to challenge you. That's how the world needs to work. We need to be more about critical thinking, and it's okay to have our opinions. We don't have to argue about it. We can just, this is my opinion. Okay, I respect that, and now this is my opinion, and I respect that.
So I'm under the impression that diversity, ensuring that you have diversity, not just in your workforce, but then also across leadership on different levels of leadership, it's almost like a cheater way to open up new markets for your product or service or for your company. Mm-hmm. Because you're then getting the perspectives, and you can do some more targeted marketing, or you can do, make sure that a version of whatever it is that you're providing also plays to what could potentially be a much larger audience, because if you start looking at demographics, especially on a global scale,
yes,
holy moly, the number of consumers that are about to come online across China and Brazil and India, massive markets of billions of people. Holy shoot.
Yes, it is. It's about looking at your market and also not ignoring that your markets will look differently. And that your branding also has to reflect the markets that you are going into as well. That's a huge component that I see a lot of companies who want to be more globally, they almost refuse to see that they're going into an Asian culture, and they're still have white folks in their advertisements.
Oh, right.
It's not just being like, okay, let's, look at, is this product, is this a need? And they're like, oh yeah, people want backpacks. Okay, that's great. But now you're going into this Asian market and you're not, one, going to have any Asian people in your campaign. That's a problem.
Right, because in marketing, it's all about getting the customer to see themselves using your product or service.
Mm-hmm.
That's 101. Wow. Okay, so a couple of definitions.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we kind of got on a little bit of a tangent for the diversity one. So how would you define organizational diversity?
People who come from all backgrounds, all education levels. And I almost would argue that education doesn't equal experience. And in my mind, I would almost, if someone is willing to work hard for your company, they may not have the educational credentials, but if they're willing to work hard, that person needs to have the job. Because why not give this person who's willing to work hard versus someone with the educational level but has never once known what it's like to work hard?
Right.
I don't know, but that's how I see it.
That's a big trend that's actually coming out it's been out, but it's circulating through the HR material again, is find that culture fit and then skills can be taught.
Yes, I completely agree. And I believe that we need to have every room that we're ever in. I would love it if we didn't look the same, if we all had different shades of colors, different backgrounds, different sexual orientations, transgender, like all the things that I believe that enriches a culture so much. Like I truly love being in rooms where I don't look like everyone else, but I also don't like being in rooms when I'm the one person that looks so different from everyone else. Like I'm the one that is the only person of color. I don't like being in those rooms.
Interesting. What's that experience like for you?
If I may ask. Yes. I thank you for asking. I think a lot of people don't, especially in Denver. I don't know how many people get that feeling the same way that I do. And for me, there's a knowing of, oh, okay, I'm the darkest one here, and I'm a woman, and I'm tiny. And a lot of, here's my bias coming out, a lot of white people are tall. That's part of it. And so being brown, being tiny, being a woman, I almost feel, I ask myself, do I belong in this room? And I don't know how many people really ask themselves that question, but I do. And sometimes I will evaluate how safe I feel and if I need to be in that room. And oftentimes I find that I connect with one person or something and that's great. And it's like, okay, well, that's a great connection. I made, a connection there. And there's other times when I'm realizing that the people that I'm in that room with just don't see my point of view. And even though I believe that it's great to have people who don't have my same opinions, I also believe in having really intellectual conversations. And sometimes these rooms just don't have it. So then I gotta just exit. That's how I roll.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. Interesting. There's also my business partner and I had this long conversation because we were writing a blurb about what Twiggs Co is. And
yes.
So she was like, we are a woman-owned, Denver-based sustainability consulting and implementation firm. So I had an issue with woman-owned because I'm like, it's almost... I was watching a very intelligent comedy on Netflix the other day.
Yes, those are the best.
I think it was Fleabag.
I love Fleabag.
So in the second season of Fleabag, they have this awards ceremony for a very powerful woman CEO, and the woman like accepts the award graciously, and then she takes the main character and they go out for a drink later, and the main character is like, well, aren't you like honored that you have this, you are, woman CEO of the year or something like that. And the CEO was like, no, it's like a subclass. It's like, I can't just be CEO of the year, I have to be a woman CEO. Like it's some sort of different variation or different ranking or something. And that's when like that hit me. I was like, shit, you're right. And so so we had this whole conversation, and then she's like, at this point in time, we still need representation. And it's speaking to the same thing that you're speaking about being the only person of color in certain rooms here in Denver. It's like the marketing thing. You don't necessarily see yourself reflected back, and so it's like, oh, did I just walk into the right room? Like, what's going on? All this other sort of...
Yes.
So it's just interesting little rabbit hole, I suppose.
I did the same thing with my company, because when I was thinking of With Love by Ego, I wanted it to be known that it is a woman-owned business, and I still do, but I also want it to be known as I'm a woman of color-owned business, because that is even less represented. And I am very proud to be a woman, and I think that's another spectrum of my identity into this company. And every company will have their journey. So I love the fact that you even thought about it and questioned it to your partner. And I think those were great questions and great conversations that you need to have at the beginning to help define, like, who do we want to be defined as you are figuring out your content, as you're figuring out your whole marketing thing. It's like, do we want to be the front face of center being a woman owned? And what does that mean to us?
Right. And also, like, what are the market implications? Because it is like, we live in a world where you do still have, these unconscious biases are, biases, that's a word. Or it's just straight up discrimination with 46% of the population supporting an incredibly inflammatory and poorly spoken, the highest office of our land. Like that, there is no opinion on racism. You either support racism or you are actively against it. And if you are silent, then you are actively supporting it by not using your voice one way or the other. And so it brought up some very real, like, gender biases. It brought up a lot, but it's turned into, like, you talk about content. She's now doing a series of content based on talking about and speaking to the importance of representation, which is super cool because it's like directly in her like passion wheelhouse. This is going to be a fantastic set of content. Vicki Carey-Davis, find her on LinkedIn. She's delightful. Delightful. Spread the word on more delightful people. Okay, so definition. What is your definition of inclusion?
To me, inclusion doesn't mean just including all the people. It also means asking them to speak up. So it's like, here, come to my dinner party, but also, what do you eat? Let me help feed you that way. And then, how did you like your food? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Having your opinion into this room is what inclusion means to me.
Gotcha. Sorry, just slight squirrel thing. In talking about the representation kind of thing, watch something else on Netflix.
Yes.
Gotta watch out for those thought-provoking documentaries. But it was talking about how it was talking about the economics of segregation. And how if you look at the amount of time that a dollar stays within certain economies, segregation was actually better for color businesses owned by people of color. or minorities, because they were segregated out, and so therefore you had a dollar spent there, but then the dollar stayed within that economy and had much more effect there. Whereas now you have integration, and then just by the nature of how our system is set up, the majority of businesses have been owned by white men. And so now as a consumer, even if you are actively trying to find a business that is owned by a person of color, it's incredibly difficult. So, and instead of having that dollar stay and impact, economies of color, which is a really interesting concept in and of itself.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. That dollar now spends something, I can't remember if it's 7 minutes or 7 hours.
Oh.
But either way, it's less than a day in economies of color, and then it moves out because of just where the proportion of business owners are. And so I went looking. I was like, okay, well, I'm part of the problem of gentrification. Can't really afford to live anywhere else. Wouldn't want to anyway. So that's not good. What else can I do? Oh, well, I can shop at businesses owned by minorities and people of color and all this other stuff. Well, I start looking for it. Just from a business development standpoint, it would be amazing if we could start doing SEO, like targeted SEO, and start talking about that representation and bringing in no, I want to search at, Google search, women owned or owned by a woman of color or something like that. And then just those businesses pop up in SEO stuff, which is really interesting. Unconscious bias in SEO. Dude, that's going to be another podcast.
Yes.
So you use the word intersectionality. Can you define that a little bit more for us?
Oh man. Okay. So, oh man. That's a hard one. It's kind of like, so you get this person. We start off with this person, right? And the person happens to be a woman. And then intersectionality happens when it's not just a white woman. It's a white woman of color. Oh, it's a person of color who happens to be a woman. That's one intersection. Maybe it's a woman of color who happens to be gay. That's another intersection. And intersectionality happens when it's not just this linear form. There's this horizontal cross-generation form, and people sometimes just think linear. They just think, but all women just need more opportunities. I'm like, well, a white woman and an Asian woman don't have the same privileges. They will walk this society very differently. And even now with just people looking at different statistics, I had a presentation with Mo, and she had the slide of the dollar versus how much money does a woman make for that $1. Just the differences of what am I trying to say? The differences of how much money the dollar doesn't go the same way for women, and more so for Black women, for Hispanics. But within that statistics, she didn't have statistics for an Asian woman. I was like, well, where's the Asian? Where's that? And she's like, I couldn't find it. And I was like, well, that's representation right there. That's a lack of, and to me, that's another part of the intersectionality.
Right. Man, and then when you're just considering, when you're doing market research, because I'm building a business and I'm helping build other businesses, and so everything relates back to how does this affect business and the opportunities that businesses address. The market research that you can do, heat maps, or where are my customers, Facebook market, the Facebook marketing backend is super creepy. It will tell you exactly what neighborhood do your people live in, what else do they like, all this stuff, right? Well, if you don't have a box to check for an Asian woman of color, an Asian woman or something like that, then that's a total market that's just gone completely unrepresented, and markets are money. So you are completely missing out on those economies.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, the blindness that this causes in your business, just opportunity-wise. And I wonder what the implications economically are, just like, you know, in the broader economic scale of representation.